After all this time, it's still the best. This is the Orpheus Rig Hunter. Now, normally we're going to see it on a pure Void 3.0 setup, but with this setup, we're going with something different. We're going with Prismatic Hunter. This is the new way that I'm running Orpheus Rig. I've been enjoying this a lot more than the traditional Void 3.0. Not that there's anything wrong with Void 3.0. It does give you access to Devour, which you're not able to get on Prismatic, but Prismatic is able to offer you another alternative in Radiant. So being able to get Radiant and also being able to have the advantage of going Transcendent and gaining some extra weapon damage and being able to have more utility in your kit just provides another alternative playstyle for this setup that's normally been tried and true for a long time. So let's get into breaking down this setup and see what we have in the Prismatic Orpheus Rig Hunter. And before we get any farther into the video, make sure that you like this video, make sure that you are subscribed, and you hit the bell for notifications every time I post a new video. As I mentioned before, this is Deadfall Tether. We are going to be able to weaken and suppress all of the enemies, and when we combine this with the current artifact mod Expanding Abyss, we can take that weaken from 30% up to 35%, which is adding more value for us when we are using void weapons. And the next part of the subclass kit that we're going to go over is the grenade. My preferred grenade is typically a dusk field when I'm dealing with champions such as overloads and unstoppables, but if I'm not really dealing with champions and I'm in a dungeon, I'm probably going to be using a swarm grenade. Now when it comes to melee, there are so many options that you can go with. As previously noted, if you're dealing with champions, you want something that typically is going to be able to slow to stun an overload, and even freeze to stun an unstoppable. Now to be able to do that, you would need to be using the Shuriken Withering Blade melee attack. Now you do also have the option of Threaded Spike, which is really great. Hunters have a lot when it comes to the melees that really help them in Prismatic because some of the other options aren't that great for them in terms of the grenade and the aspects, but Threaded Spike is really good because it severs targets, and that's a 40% reduction against enemies, and you can catch it to be able to return some melee energy. It will ricochet to several enemies, so you will sever a group of enemies at once. We also have the option of using the Snare Bomb, so when we combine Smoke Bomb and Expanding Abyss, that 15% weaken actually moves up to a 25% weaken. So we can add that into our kit if we want to use that instead of the other options that I suggested. And with the melee out of the way, let's dive into talking about the prismatic aspects for this build. Let's dive in and take a look at what makes this build special. So the first aspect is Stylish Executioner, which provides 2 fragment slots for the build. Defeating a target affected by any elemental debuff will grant us invisibility. While we're invisible, the next melee attack that we dish out is going to weaken a target by 15%. Once again, we pair that with Expanding Abyss and a Void Weapon, and that can go up to 25%. The cool thing about this is when we go Transcendent, we get both of our melee charges back. That's going to help in the build because we're going to be able to dish out a 25% weaken for ourselves with Expanding Abyss and this aspect. As a quick example, you're going to see me use a Shuriken, and then I'm going to go invisible. I'm going to use another Shuriken to weaken. Then I'm going to do a Gambler's Dodge, get a Shuriken back, and then repeat this process again. For aspect number 2, we have Threaded Spectre, which provides 3 fragment slots. Now, the reason we're using Threaded Spectre is because we need to be able to have some safety. Typically with Void Hunter, you're able to go invisible in multiple different ways. You will be able to Gambler's Dodge to go invisible, and that will recharge your melee, which would be your Smoke Bomb potentially. You could dive with your Smoke Bomb and go invisible, but we don't have that on Prismatic. So what we're doing on Prismatic is using Threaded Spectre to draw the aggro once we use our class ability by deploying a Strand Decoy. This will save your life. We're using it in Grandmaster Nightfalls, and it's protecting me from getting shot from snipers and many other things that are trying to all directly fire on me. Set up your clone, work next to it, not behind it, not in front of it. Work to the left or the right of it, and it will save your life. I promise you. So for our fragments in this build, we have 5 available, and all of them are going to combine together nicely to be able to flesh out everything that we're doing and support what we're trying to go for with this build. The first one being Facet of Dawn. Facet of Dawn is going to provide us a 25% weapon damage bonus with powered melee hits against targets. If we get a powered melee final blow, nearby allies will also become radiant and get that 25% weapon damage bonus. We have 2 shurikens or withering blades that we're able to use to be able to give ourselves that radiant buff through Facet of Dawn. Now, it will only be a 5-second max timer per each melee, and it does not stack, but you also have a Gambler's Dodge, which you can use next to an enemy to be able to get another Withering Blade back and then get an additional 5 seconds. But the important thing that we have here this season in our Hunter's Journal is the artifact mod Radiant Orbs. While we have a Solar or Prismatic subclass equipped, picking up an Orb of Power makes us radiant. And in this sandbox right now, it's very easy to make them for yourself. And teammates are also always making Orbs of Power as well if they have an appropriate build. So we're going to be able to get 10 full seconds of Radiant from any time we're picking up a Orb of Power. And our second fragment in the build is going to be Facet of Protection. While within 15 meters of 3 or more enemies, you're going to gain a 15% damage resist. Now, the in-game description is erroneous. The effect does not become increased while Transcendent. Instead, that 15% DR from Protection stacks with Transcendent's 20% damage resistance, totaling up to 32% damage resistance. You also get plus 10 strength, which is good for your shuriken cooldown. So we have a damage bonus with Facet of Dawn, and then we have some survivability with Facet of Protection. With Facet of Balance, this is going to be just a energy to sustain us, to keep our abilities flowing. With 3 rapid light damage kills, it will grant you 10% melee energy, and with 3 rapid dark damage kills, you will be granted 10% grenade energy. Graviton Lance is just a monster at chewing through enemies, even when it's not on the surge, as in this week's Grandmaster Nightfall. It is a solar and arc surge, but it's just chewing through these enemies. So you're able to generate this extra melee energy quite often, which is allowing you to activate Facet of Dawn through your Withering Blade double shurikens that you have in your subclass kit. For the 4th fragment in the build, we're going to be using Facet of Honor. Now with Facet of Honor, picking up elemental pickups such as Tangles or Stasis Shards will grant you a specific amount of darkness energy for your Transcendent meter, or light energy for your Transcendent meter. Ionic Traces, Fire Sprites, and Void Breaches all giving 7.5% light energy, Stasis Shards giving 5%, and Tangles giving 10% darkness energy. Because we have a Strand aspect equipped, we will be able to generate Tangles, so we'll be able to pick those up or destroy them to gain a quick 10% darkness energy on our Transcendent meter. And when we're picking up Void Breaches, which we're going to be able to do very easily with the artifact mod Elemental Siphon, we're going to be getting 7.5% light energy on our meter. So we're going to be getting all this extra free energy to our meter without having to really think about anything or worry about anything, because Void Breaches are going to give us class ability energy, and destroying a Tangle can provide some extra additional AoE damage to the enemies that you're fighting. The 5th and final fragment inside of the build is Facet of Hope. While you have an elemental buff, you are granted 60% additional base class ability regeneration rate while affected by any elemental buff. Let's rule out the darkness buffs because we won't be able to get Frost Armor in this build, and we won't be able to get Woven Mail either. But we do have several light buffs that we'll be able to take advantage of. The first one being Radiant when we pick up those orbs or when we hit a Withering Blade on an enemy. The other one is going to be Invisibility. When we do activate Stylish Executioner and we go invisible, the entire time that you're invisible, you're getting that 60% additional base class ability regeneration. We also have the ability to get a Void Overshield, and the way that we will be getting a Void Overshield is with the Void Hegemony artifact mod. Now, here is a breakdown based on the armor and weapons that I've found comfortable in my loadouts so far this season. There's going to be a couple different ways that we do this, but I'm going to break down the armor mods very quick because I feel like they're the most basic part because they just fill in the gaps. Because we're relying on Threaded Spectre for survivability, we have Bolstering Detonation. That way, when we hit anything with a Duskfield Grenade, we get some grenade ability energy. Then we also have Focusing Strike. Anytime that we hit anything with a powered melee attack, we get class ability energy. So we're able to get that class ability back and have it up more often. This is very basic on the helmet. 1 copy of Harmonic Siphon to generate orbs of power, so we can pick those up and become radiant for 10 seconds with the Radiant Orbs artifact mod here in season 24. Heavy ammo finder because I am using an exotic primary and I want to double dip into trying to get the most heavy drops possible here by using that mod in conjunction with the Graviton Lance. And then I have a copy of Heavy Ammo Scout so I can make sure that also supporting my team, because this is a team-based support build with a little bit more offensive utility in it than the typical Void Orpheus Rig Hunter. Then on the chest, I'm just matching my resistances to what I'm doing. It's Exodus Crash, there's a lot of snipers from far away, so I put on sniper damage resistance, a copy of arc resistance because they are arc snipers, and then harmonic resistance just to reduce some void damage that I might be taking. On the legs, these are important right here. Orbs of Restoration is going to provide a small amount of energy to our abilities with the least amount of energy. So this just helps top up whatever our lowest is, so we can always try to keep ourselves at a good baseline with our abilities. We don't have Devour because we're not on Void 3.0, so 1 copy of Recuperation really helps. You get your health back, you get a little chunk there, but then you're also going to be getting Radiant at the same time, so that's a no-brainer. The other thing that you're also going to be getting is a Void Weapon damage. We're going to get a small bonus to damage while we have any armor charge, and that's going to be for our Void Weapon. So I use Graviton Lance as my primary weapon. It's just really potent, and it's always been good ever since its rework. And then, I mean, I have a Tapan here, but there's a couple other things that I've been using. We've got Edge Transits, we've got Commemorations. There's plenty of things that you can use there in terms of legendaries. And then when it comes to the cloak, what I'm running is 1 copy of Reaper. Because I know I'm going to be using my class ability, the next weapon kill after that is going to spawn an Orb of Power. Time Dilation is going to extend how long we're able to have that Void Weapon Surge. Now think, we are combining a Void Weapon Surge for some extra weapon damage. Then we have Radiant on top of that. We have the ability with Expanding Abyss on our tether to debuff by 35%. With Stylish Executioner, we have the ability to debuff up to 25% with Expanding Abyss. So we have all these ways to buff ourselves, and we have a lot of offensive utility and survivability to rival and match that of the traditional Void 3.0 Orpheus Rig Hunter. Thank you guys all so much for watching. In the background, I'm just going to close out with some gameplay here. We have the Prismatic Orpheus Rig Hunter. This is the offensive support build. This is a Solar and Arc Surge Master Law Sector with a power level of 2030 and overcharged Trace Rifle. So you can see that I'm getting no 25% bonus from my kinetic weapon by matching the surge. My void weapons also aren't going to be receiving that 25% damage bonus as well. I've got the 9 key weapons listed here that I think are really important in this build. Things like La Monarch for intrinsic overload, Commemoration for ad clear, Blast Furnace if you're using something like Buried Bloodline as your special ammo weapon, Edge Transit to be able to dump heavy ammo, power, weapon damage out. Then you've got Elsie's Rifle, once again a good kinetic option if you're using something like Leviathan's Breath. If you're not and you're going with something like Graviton Lance, that's very acceptable as well. And then you have Wish Ender as well, which is a tried and true option there. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I'm happy to be back in the groove of things right now. And I have about 6 or 7 other builds in preparation that I'm going to be working on in the next couple of days. So stay tuned, be patient with me. I apologize for the long delay for any content uploads, but I look to change that here in the coming future. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Peace.